Hello and welcome to CoTESOL. My name is Shaun Manning and I'm an Associate Professor at Hanguk University of Foreign Studies in Seoul. I have a PhD in Applied Linguistics from Victoria University of Wellington in New Zealand, and my area of speciality was on task-based teaching and learning. Today I'd like to talk for a few minutes about this wonderful shift we have had to, let's call it, online emergency teaching and learning, and more specifically, how this impacts interaction in the language classroom. The title of my talk is Zoom or Room, Investigating Differences in On and Offline Interaction. I'll talk very briefly about interaction in EFL classes, a little more specifically about the values clarification task, and then my study that compared on and offline values clarification task performance, and some thoughts going forward. Because this is an asynchronous discussion, I won't be live for Q&A except on Discord, it's a conference app. Also, feel free to send me an email. It will appear at the end of the presentation. Anyway, let's get started. Interactive processes that lead to learning. In general, we think of interaction in the classroom as taking place between one or more interlocutors along with the student. Now, whether that's the teacher talking to the student or other classmates, they're all interlocutors. The nice thing about interlocutors is they provide immediate feedback. Right away they say something like, "What? I don't understand," or "Really?" or meaning, "Go on." They're also a source of information, whether it's language information or content information or how to do the job information. This could be because of the way the teacher has designed the task, or because of their previous learning history, either with the teacher or with other teachers. Tasks also, or interlocutors also provide a realistic scenario through which realistic scenario for out-of-class language use, and are an audience. In language classrooms, peers also provide assistance, and assistance is important in language learning. It is part of collaborative interaction. It can take the form of a language-related episode, which I'll look at today, in terms of which is an event in a conversation where students reflect consciously on the language they are producing. Whether it's self-correcting or correcting others, or even just talking to themselves. Assistance can also mean asking directly what Long might have called a clarification request or a confirmation check. Maybe continuing a partner's utterance when he or she could not. And making suggestions. Also, waiting. We don't think of this as being assistance, but sometimes just waiting, particularly if one student is a really much higher level than another. If the higher level student, rather than jumping in and talking, just stops and waits for the weaker student to finish, or to keep going, that weaker student gets more opportunity to talk or to say what's not going right and ask for help. Also, gesture and facial expressions. Assistance that is offered, accepted, and used creates a joint performance which can be seen as an important precursor of individual production. Basically, this comes from a sociocultural perspective of learning, in which students need to be able to do something with help, with assistance, before they can do it on their own. And in a language classroom, the teacher can't be everywhere. Therefore, it's up to other peers. And learning happens, I'm reading the bottom one here, learning happens when learners do something with assistance that they were not quite capable of doing without help before. And hopefully, after doing it, they become capable of doing it without help, or better yet, being able to help others. Now, in a language class, students typically want to communicate, whereas school systems typically want students to have accurate language form. And in TBLT, or more generally in communicative language teaching, learners tend to focus on meaning and on completing the task, and not to form unless attention has been directed specifically to form through task design. And task design can promote attention to form during communication. For example, the values clarification task, reconstruction tasks, and dictogloss. So what is the values clarification task, you ask? Funny. First was proposed by Gower and later revised by myself. Students are given a somewhat controversial prompt related to the topic of their lesson that incorporate vocabulary or grammar targets for the lesson. Students will read the prompt silently and indicate their level of agreement. Strongly disagree, disagree, agree, or strongly agree. They can write notes with their pencil on a piece of paper or wherever. Then we move them into groups. Now in a classroom this is easy. You put 4 students here, 4 over there, 4 over there, and you just move them around the room. Online, if you have a video conferencing app like Zoom, you can put students into breakout rooms. And this would then take the students from your lesson and put them into smaller groups where they only see and hear the members of that group. And while they're in that group, the teacher can drop in or leave and go to another group, drop in with them, and listen to what they're doing. Once in their groups, it's up to them to begin their conversation by deciding which prompt to start with, indicating their levels of agreement, giving their reasons, and listening. And they finish the prompt by rewriting it into a newly worded version that all of the members of the group now strongly agree with. For example, the regional disparities in healthcare, education, and other services are inevitable because wherever there are fewer people, there is naturally less infrastructure. Now this came from a university class where they had been reading about the medical strike of last summer where young doctors went on strike. They can indicate they strongly disagree with this, they disagree with it, they agree with it, they strongly agree with it. Now we should notice that this is a very long sentence, and the second one here actually has 2 sentences, and it's possible that a student might agree with the first part and disagree with the second, or disagree with the first and agree with the second, or something like this. And in both cases, the statements use vocabulary and grammar structures covered in the lessons, so disparity, inevitable, infrastructure, infringement, undermining, and if clauses. Okay. Now, in my case, I always put the values clarification task at the end, but you can make it at the beginning of a unit too. There's nothing stopping you. The revising the statement into a mutually agreed upon one and writing the new version down as a final step to the values clarification promotes talk about the meaning of the sentence, talking about the words themselves, the grammar, spelling sometimes, and it forces them to come to an agreement of some kind. Sorry, I have a sore throat. Now, in my own work, we found that organizing, understanding, expressing, and negotiating had to happen and did happen every time a student or a group of students did a values clarification task. There were always 4 phases. They didn't happen necessarily in order. They might express an opinion and then realize they've misunderstood the prompt. They might try to come to a consensus and realize they've misunderstood the prompt. They might express an opinion, someone else tries a consensus and has misunderstood this person's opinion. But these four things are always there. One other thing I noticed was while one group member was writing the group's answer down, there was a lot of talk from the others about the words and grammar of the final version. While they were just giving their opinions, there was very little talk about language. And if there was, it was usually the speaker asking, or the speaker self-correcting, or speaker saying, how can I say, but when one person was actually writing down their new version, what we get is the other 2 or 3 members all putting their 2 cents worth in about the wording or the phrasing of the new version. So of course, in spring of 2020, we all went online into emergency online teaching, and I was set up then with the problem of deciding, even with breakout rooms, do we get the same kind of learning opportunity from a values clarification task? Are there any differences online and offline? Do we still get the 4 phases? And are there any differences in assistance online and offline? Because one of the key elements of task-based teaching is students help each other get better. My participants were freshmen, first-year students in an English conversation class. Each class was 2 periods long. Each period is 50 minutes. First, we met once a week. The first period was always input, vocabulary, usually a reading, sometimes a listening, and some kind of language awareness activities, either based on the reading or based on the previous week's discussion. The second period was always output. We would do a values clarification task and for 20 minutes, followed by an informal debate, and then followed finally by some kind of language awareness again. Now this design does look quasi-experimental, but I'm going to warn you now, it's probably better to think of this as being me looking at 2 different cases and comparing them, and don't jump to huge conclusions yet. Second semester of 2019, we were offline. 16 to 20 students per class. There were some repeat students. Current affairs readings. Now remember, current affairs in 2019 and current affairs in 2020 are going to be different. All classroom interaction was recorded, and the values clarification tasks we're looking at today were both 20 minutes long. Same thing going on with the 2020 semester 2 group, except that breakout room activities were recorded individually by the students and then had to be sent to me. Current affairs obviously are going to be updated. Now I took 2 different lessons, made transcripts, and examined them for language-related episode pauses and phases or moves. So to give you an idea, this is what an offline group looks like. Blurred out their faces. They're sitting there, and you can see the students are watching while this student, second from the right, is writing down their final version. The other 3 are paying attention. The Zoom class, this is a breakout room. You can see there's 4 members. They're all looking at a shared Google Doc where their prompts and their version of the revised sentence should be. Now in my results from the transcripts, now with offline, due to attrition and non-participation, I have 9 groups, and online I have 11 groups. 2 classes, 6 in one, 5 in the other. 2 classes, 4 in one, 5 in the other. Language-related episodes, now each task was 20 minutes long. Language-related episode total, we would expect with 9 groups there to be fewer. We have 141, but with 11 groups I only found 32. So that means on average, which is per group per 20 minutes, we have 15 language-related episodes offline per group per 20 minutes. But online, we have less than 3 language-related episodes per group per 20 minutes. Pauses, just silences. We have 480 seconds total across 9 groups of tasks. 9 different tasks, 20 minutes each. 11 different tasks, performances, 12,112 seconds of pausing. For an average of just over 3 minutes, 3 minutes and 12 seconds per group per 20 minutes. So that's 3 minutes of silence out of 20. In the offline group, we have less than 1 minute of silence, on average, combined for the whole task. And the organizing talk worked out to be fairly similar, although the offline group is lower, 10.6 versus 12.1 organizing moves. This leads us to think, well, wait a second, there does look to be something going on here. Far more LREs, far fewer. Far less pausing, far more pausing. What's going on? Let's take a brief look at a transcript. I'm not going to read this all out to you, but I will show you if I can. Let's do this. Maybe this will work. I don't know. Over here we have, no, it's not going to work. Okay. They're just starting. Then I think we should change the part that I do not want to work, but I want to work. Student 4 comes in and says, yeah, like conditional, grammar term. If I had to work for a large conglomerate, something like that. So, yes. Or we can change the whole sentence, like to adapt any work culture. Oh, we need social skills, many skills. So here, S6 is just continuing to adapt any work culture. We need many skills, such as social skills like that. Okay. How should we start? Wait, what did you say? Like if we want to, like if we need some kind of social skills. And then down here in 114, but can we change that, like the sentence that much? I mean, we've been talking about a rephrased sentence and suddenly we're back to the task organizing talk. Are we doing this right? Can we change the sentence that much? And then for 3 or 4 statements they think, yes, finally, I think we can change. And so now they've decided to go with what their plan was. The requirements to adapt in any work culture, to adapt in, okay, maybe just do this. Let's rephrase it again. They're talking still about the phrasing of the sentence. Requirements such as social skills, willpower, repeating willpower, and habits and rituals, there's laughter, or like personal struggles, yes, So something that could keep you going, even if you don't want to work for that company, like a driving force. Does that make sense? Okay, motivation? Yeah, something like that. So here we've got someone trying to express someone suggesting a word. Here we've got words being suggested, willpower, habits, personal struggles. And on we go until down here at line 150, line 152. Line 150. S5 says, let's just say we need personal efforts, comma, social skills and personal efforts, comma, social skills and motive. So she's even saying now to the writer, hey, you've got to put commas in there. She's dictating. So this is what an offline interaction often looks like. Many people giving many different words and many different phrasings at once. The one writer sitting there with their pencil or pen trying to frantically write it down on the paper. 2 or 3 other people looking at it. Offline, we get something a little bit different. Okay, so does anybody want to read the second part for me? Sorry, this is online. My mistake. Online. Different. Okay, so does anybody want to read the second part for me so I can write it down? Okay, maybe we can say like, even though the striking doctors are not wholly fulfilling their duty to the public, they are requiring the government to listen to their stand. And this is 8.5-second pause. And she says, what is this silence? Sorry, I thought it was my Wi-Fi. 3 other students, there's 4 students in the group, 3 other students are silent for nearly 9 seconds after student 1, has read a possible response to the item. Now this is very different from what we saw in the other group. They were jumping in, they were giving words as the person is dictating. And then S2 just says, I thought it was my Wi-Fi. And then S2 continues, can you put what you wrote on the Word doc in here in the chat so I can like see the final version? So what's happening here is instead of talking about the final version, they're just expecting someone to write it and send it to them, and they'll just go, okay. So we lose a lot of this focus on form, at least in this case, we've lost a lot of the focus on wording, let's say, of the final sentence, simply because rather than talk about it, one person can type it and just send it out to the others via chat or on the shared document, and they can agree or disagree with it before finalizing it. So there really isn't any changing after this. From this first one, they're required to listen to their stand, and even though, down here at the end, even though the striking doctors are not wholly fulfilling their duty to the public, they have the rights to require the government to listen to their stand. It really didn't change. A little bit of change, but not much. And then they just say, it's suitable, and off they go to the next one. Now, this isn't incorrectly done. It's just differently done. And it's done through text chat, and really whoever's sending it in the chat is the one who's going to put it up on the Google Doc. We're not seeing the kind of wordplay and word use and even joking and laughter that we saw in the offline class. So some implications and just a couple thoughts before I let you go here. The online task featured far fewer suggestions for wording and grammar than offline. Online talk had the option of using chat, and potentially you could suggest words through chat just like you could by speaking them, but this wasn't what was happening. Someone would just suggest a whole sentence, type it out, send it to them, and if they liked it, boom, it was done. There was very little negotiation either on the chat or orally. And there's far longer pausing. Now this could be due to Wi-Fi, but I'm thinking more likely it's due to students just chatting, or, unfortunately, chatting on a different app to someone else about something else. Cat talk with their girlfriend or something. Okay, and I will point out that these students were very familiar with the requirements of the values clarification task at the time they were doing it, in the lessons that I examined. The samples were not matched for topic, and this will affect vocabulary and vocabulary use. So I want you to take what I said here with a grain of salt, that if the one topic produces more challenging vocab or different vocab, we would expect more language-related episodes. So I'm thinking this isn't really an a priori set quasi-experiment. This is a case study of offline and a case study of online, and I'm kind of looking at the two cases to find out that, yeah, probably we should do this kind of a more controlled thing, because there is good reason to suspect that online interaction through Zoom, even though we can talk and put students into groups, or WebEx can do this too, I think, that using the online medium is not quite the same and not quite giving us the kind of interaction that's most beneficial for language learning. I'm out of time. If you have any questions, fire me an email or get in touch with me on the Discord app here at the conference. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much for listening to my talk.